Hello, welcome back to Trinice's Corner. This is Trinice, and if this is your first time visited my channel, welcome. If you're a returning guest, welcome back, my friend. My focus is typically around matters surrounding DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, my consulting firm, The Virtual Coffee, is really primarily supporting clients and individuals around that topic in many different ways as well. I also do customized branding for individuals, resume writing, mock interviews, really just making sure that you as a person is very comfortable within that space, whether you're interviewing for an external or an internal role. You've got to make sure that your nerves are not getting the best of you. Well, that's where I come in. I also do this on an organizational level as well. So, for example, an organization will hire my firm and we'll go in and do a really at scale a version of what I just described. So, we'll educate and train their internal employees on how best to interview and put their best foot forward. So, that could be from doing, group size, large and small group size mock interviews, large and group size interview and resume writing skills, and ensuring that you are mentally and physically and emotionally ready for putting your best foot forward internally to get that promotion that you have been eyeing for quite some time and you deserve. So that's really what the Virtual Coffee does. And I started this YouTube channel really to do a lot of the same things. So today, what I want to focus on is a topic that I've seen a lot of my clients, new and existing clients, come to me with, and that is centered around ERGs, employee resource groups. So today I wanted to talk about ERGs, employee resource groups, and some of the pitfalls that you'll find within a ill-structured ERG. And really just understanding what is an ERG, how do we see them now, how do they function now, how do we bring them into alignment where it honestly benefits not just the organization, but the employees who it's intended to benefit in the first place. So we'll look at this. So let's get into it. So what's the responsibility from an organizational and individual within that organization perspective? What does that look like? I want to make sure that we thoroughly understand what is an ERG, what should an ERG do within an organization, what is the role and responsibility of the employees within the organization as it relates to the ERG, what should the leadership structure look like, and all those different things in between, if you would. So this is going to be a really fun, discussion today, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So please go ahead, make sure you subscribe, and like as well, and turn on your notification bell so you can receive any follow-up videos that I do in conjunction to this one. I'm going to try to make this one a little bit short, but I may not be successful. So in the event that I have to break it up into two videos, forgive me ahead of time. I tried. So without any delays, let's get right into it. What is an employee resource group and how did we get here? Okay, ERG, employee resource groups, really started we started thinking about it back in the 60s, in fact. And, we all know what was happening in the 60s. Well, civil rights was happening in the 60s. Racial unrest was happening in the 60s. There were a lot of different things that are happening within our culture, especially within the US, that was happening in the 60s around race and discrimination and all of those different, important factors. Well, within the 1960s, we saw a huge amount of racial unrest. That started the conversation around ERGs, employee resource groups. Well, in 1970, around that time frame, the first organization that actually took steps to create an ERG was actually the CEO of Xerox. And yes, I said the CEO. What Xerox decided to do was unprecedented. It had never been done before. And that was to create an employee resource group. And the name of this was the National Black Employee Caucus. And you can put that in any acronym you want. But the Black Employee Caucus, really, that was a networking group. And it was designed to ensure his Black employees had a safe space. And it was birthed out of that desire to provide safe spaces for his employees within the journal, but that racial unrest that was going on within the 1960s and 70s. And of course, we see it now to this day. This was an organization response to that. And thus we have decades of iteration of what the true meaning of the ERGs really kind of stemmed from. And I make that emphasis that an organization actually took the step, because a lot of times we see that organizations actually take a back seat. They believe that there is a separation between what their employees, Black and brown, or everything in between, what their employees face externally and come into work, and they want a separation between the two. They think, hey, whatever you're facing externally, don't take it into the office, right? Keep those things separate. Have that what we call balance between the two. What Xerox found was that was impossible. What we know today is that is impossible. Organizations who choose not to take a stand and not to support and create these safe spaces within their organizations, they suffer, and they suffer significantly. And that is outside of creating a formal ERG group within the organization. That really kind of builds into the psychological safety and building psychological safety for your organization within the cultural veins, if you will. Let's look at how employee resource groups have evolved over these past decades, if you would. What we find is the original intent of ERGs to provide networking and building safe spaces for employees. What we find is the original intent of creating an ERG is in two layers. One, the original formation is important. Now, like I said before, the CEO of Xerox, the original creation of the ERG within Xerox was very intentional. And not only did it have leadership support, but it was the CEO himself that sparked all of this, working alongside with the employees, of course. But the CEO, I believe his name at the time was Joseph Wilson. The CEO of Xerox is the one that actually put a lot of work and resources behind this. Which leads me to my first point. For any ERGs to be successful, you 100% need the support of the senior leadership. And when I say senior leadership, I'm talking about the CEO, okay? I'm talking about that individual that is responsible for leading the entire direction and the success of an organization. That person needs to get their hands dirty. They need to be in the trenches. They need to make sure that value is placed from the very beginning on every single employee resource groups that's created. It cannot be siloed and restricted to HR or other ERGs to create or other focus groups to create. That person has to show up. And it does something incredible when the senior leadership is at the table during the discussion, during the planning, at any phase, frankly, right? It says something and it sends a clear message to everyone involved. And that is, this is extremely important. I am being held accountable to this. You see my face. And so I am holding myself accountable, but I also give you a permission to do the same. Hold me accountable for the success. Hold me accountable for the failures. Be open to share feedback with me personally on your thoughts, successes or failures. How do we need to pivot? How do we need to shift? If we need to shift, what's working, what's not working? It creates such safe spaces for your employees, and this is to the CEOs. It creates a safe space that you've never seen before. If you want innovation and you want creativity to flow, let an employee and give them permission to actually do that. Best way to do it is you have to show up. You've got to ensure that you're showing yourself vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is something that's important to me. And so I'm giving you permission to also feel like it's important to you, right? Have some skin in the game, all pun intended, if you would. So that's the first. The second is that the original formation of ERGs was really as a networking and community outreach group, right? If you would, they're really looking very, very and solely inward. So, as I'll give you an example, many organization, and this is if they've even planned this out, many well-built ERG groups currently look something like this. It is operationally and strategically aligned to the hiring and inclusive practices around DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, right? Everything is tied in. In fact, individuals, employees, the employee base of different ERGs, whether it's a Black ERG, Hispanic ERG, Asian, LGBTQIA ERGs, disability ERGs, all of these different diverse groups. These ERGs, really a lot of the onus and a lot of the pressure and responsibility is placed on the members and other employees. It's placed on these individuals. And the burden is placed on these individuals to demonstrate the success of a particular ERG, and I'll share some of my thoughts on that, on building an ERG with where the system and the framework is solely based on the success of internal employees. So I'll share a little bit about that, the pros and cons, and what I've seen to be successful and what I've seen to be massive failure rates of having a system such as that. But what you'll typically find when an organization makes the decision to create an ERG, they create it in many different ways. And I'll give you just one of the examples, especially the common example I see within my practice. A large number of ERGs are stemmed from employee complaints, quite commonly through employee surveys. And those employee surveys will look like, hey, an employee may respond in kind where they, lack belonging, or they lack a sense of community or a sense of inclusion within the organization. However it's phrased, the organization identifies, hey, guess what? We need to create something to pacify the employees. Well, the best way, and frankly, the most cost-effective way, or like my mother used to say, the cheapest way, is to create employee resource groups. Because you get, and putting it frankly, you get free labor. You get individuals that you're already paying anyway. You're paying them a salary. They already have a job within the organization. You don't have to hire external resources or get a chief diversity officer or build a team around. You don't have to do any of those things. So organizations look at this as an easy fix, which we will talk about a little bit more, that it's not. So that's a spoiler alert. But that's how most ERGs are created, is based on employee complaints. What they then do is they create sometimes focus groups. And these focus groups will be a collection of individuals from different parts of the organization. And the burden would be placed on these individuals who are ill-prepared, not educated about this particular subject, and honestly thrown into the wolves to create structural dynamics within an organization. Now, what the organizations do to the detriment of these individuals is that they pull on their passion and zeal. They pull on their desire to change something. You've got employees that want to see change, and they're just grateful that they're a part of a possible mechanism to change within their organization. The companies use that to their advantage, and it is ill will. The only people that suffer are honestly the people who it intended to help in the first place, the employees, the ones that are non-funded, which is the majority of the ERGs that are non-funded. Non-funded ERGs will typically have, different legs or different arms. They will align to the cultural and ethnic dynamics within the organization. So, for example, if an organization have a great number of Latino and Hispanic community within their organization, guess what? They'll create an ERG that supports that culture and that ethnic group. If they got a lot of women, guess what? Women get an ERG as well. If they have a lot of African Americans or Black employees, guess what? You get one of those too. LGBTQIA, awesome. You get one as well. So they try to do it based on the dynamics within the organization. And frankly, great. That's fantastic. You then ideally create safe spaces for these individuals. Now, what typically happens in majority of ERGs, whether it's funded or non-funded, is that only those ethnic or specialty groups will attend, will support, and will give voice to, period. The safe spaces are, you will only see if it's a Hispanic group or Asian group. You'll primarily, almost 80 to 90% of the employees that attend and that participate and engage are going to be of that ethnic minority group or that group in general. And we'll touch on that briefly of the pros and cons of doing that. Yes, that does give you a sense of psychological safety or safe space, if you would, right? To air your concerns and knowing that the employee the person that sits across from you or, on that Zoom call, somewhat not just favors you or represent your culture or your ethnic group or whatever it may be, but they may have some sort of experience that aligns to yours. So of course that will create a safe space in itself. However, what this non-funded group does is it literally becomes a vent session. And because the burden is primarily on the employee, you find that you have very limited sense of authority and power to do anything and make any changes. Yes, of course, you'll make surface level changes, but true change, true cultural and structural change to the organization and the culture itself, non-existent. It's not going to happen because you were never given the authority that was needed for your role in the first place. So unfortunately, you find that you are isolated to really just kind of having people that look and sound and act like you and have similar cultural norms like you. Yes, you'll find somewhat of a safe space temporarily. Long term, it is not going to help you at all. Actually, it's just going to create a more toxic environment over time. And we'll talk about why I say it creates a toxic environment long term in a second. So that's the non-funded, cheapest way to go, kind of ERGs, right? And of course, not one size fits all. So there are some exceptions to everything that I talk about. Okay, so don't come for me. The second one is going to be the ERG groups that you've got lots of resources behind, right? This is where it is maybe a little bit closer monitored. This is where you may have someone that has a D&I title, and that person has solicited different groups to come together, different focus groups to kind of do all of these things. The burden is still on the employees to really build a lot of that out. That person will usually pull a lot from the employees themselves. They don't have a staff. And so because they don't have a staff, well, they use the free labor that they currently have. So really a lot of things, a lot of similarities you'll see. There is a small budget attached to this. So budget around maybe bringing in a speaker here or there, or, the small budgets to rent a venue or, to have pizza day, whatever it may be. Very small budget aligned. What happens within this structure where there's a budget aligned, you'll find that these ERGs will actually have some connection to the recruitment and to talent acquisition. So maybe it's where members of the ERGs sit on a interview panel, or they interview individuals, or whatever it may be, however it may look. Usually there is some sort of connection between the recruitment aspect of recruiting diverse talent. If it's a veteran focused ERG, for example, they'll ensure that any veteran that is coming into the organization have some sort of touch point with this particular ERG. Similar nature, right? So there is some sort of connection. So you have a little bit more of a structure around that. Not much, but a little bit more. It gives you that, warm and fuzzy false sense of security at times. So you'll find that in many cases of this is that this burden is still on the employees. And normally, as with the case of an ERG with absolutely no structure and no budget assigned to it, and no really proper D&I individuals that is assigned and leading it, no specific leadership tied to it. And when I say specific leadership tied to it, I know someone will say, well, our executive attend our ERGs, or they are the executive chair of an ERG. That is absolutely not the same thing. That is completely different than having leadership, accountability, and ownership over an ERG or within an ERG. And why I say that is when you've got an executive chair over an ERG, yes, that person may come in and do a discussion here or there. Sure, they may attend a few meetings. Their department may even have monetary alignment on the success of DE&I goals and metrics. Absolutely. But it does not mean these individuals are committed at all, or that they have any accountability personally. And there's so much around this. This even applies to executives or senior leadership that have their bonuses tied to the outcome of DE&I metrics. I'm talking to them too. There are so many ways that you can manipulate metrics and data to suit your. There are so many ways to manipulate, or let's use another term, to adjust or customize metrics and data around DE&I to suit the bonuses and budgetary alignments, and that suits an individual's budgetary and bonus outcome. So there are ways, and companies use it quite a lot. So you cannot just use that as your litmus test or your marker or your benchmark to determine whether or not an executive or senior leadership is honestly committed or aligned to the DEI goals and vision. So another key element that I do want us to really talk about is, and I'd love to see some comments below around this, that element is, how does an employee resource group impact, well, the employees? What are some of the impact that you've seen? And this is both positively and negatively. So we'll cover the positive first. So some of the positive impact of an ERG within an organization is, well, this immense sense of belonging, especially if you've never felt it before within your organization. The sense that you can get into, the sense that you can be a part of a group of individuals that, for the most part, look like you, that have had similar cultural experiences as you have, that face a lot of the same struggles within the organization that you face, and that understands you from an intrinsic level. That kind of sense of belonging and sense of psychological safety that you may feel within, if you're lucky, you'll feel within an ERG is unmet, honestly. So, and of course, it gives you that sense that your organization really does mean you well. They've created this safe space for you that probably never existed before. The sense is that they've thought about you. They want to invest in you, and you get an opportunity in some cases to build something incredible within this company that you call home. That's the positive, right? That's the That's the ideal emotions that any organization want to bring to their employees. And with those emotions, that's where you get innovation, productivity out the roof. That's where you get individuals that come to work and love what they do because it's more than just work. That's what we all want. That's a goal that we all want to achieve from a leadership perspective and also from an employee-based perspective, right? From a community and a cultural level, that is the DNA that makes a culture perfect, right? All right, that's the good part. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's rare when you find that long term. And like I said, this is long term. This is not the initial zeal and excitement and passion that this is long term. This is anywhere from a year and beyond within an ERG. Here are some of the downsides and the negative things that you'll face in an ERG that was never built sustainably and with long-term planning in mind, right? And for the most part, I'm talking about most of the ERGs that you'll find. Now, if you're within that sweet spot of those initial few years, awesome, enjoyed, soak it up. I love it, and I'm happy for you. However, what you'll find is that unless there is long-term strategy that's built into to ensure that that is sustained over time, you'll find that things will morph and they'll change into something else. And I'll create a picture of a typical ERG and maybe a worst case scenario. Right now, like I said before, this is not one size fits all. There are exceptions, plenty of exceptions to this. So don't come for me, okay? So what you'll find is after an ERG has passed this honeymoon stage, as I call it, right, which ranges in terms of time frame. There's no specific time frame, but once it's past that honeymoon stage, what you'll find is the pressure that originally has been building on the employees, individual employees, is now at scale. You'll see significant cracks within some of these walls. These cracks may look like employee burnout within the ERGs. You'll find that these individuals that are part of the ERGs, that are putting in the work, that are creating something that is beyond themselves, that are once were so excited, you'll find that they are starting to wane. Their passion, their zeal, all the things that they initially got so excited about, they're starting to wane. The burden of it, of having all of this on their shoulders, being ill prepared for the ERG, is starting to show. And unfortunately, it starts to show in their mental health and in their performance within the organization as well. That once heightened sense of creativity and zeal that they brought to projects, some of that is starting to wane. You'll even see a heightened sense of imposter syndrome throughout these different ERGs as well. You'll find that these individuals who once were completely committed to the success of the organization, they're questioning whether or not this is still their home, if they can still build a future within this organization. And that is because they have been burdened down with the pressure, the success, and the failure of something they were once so excited about, but they are no longer seeing the long-term results that they anticipated, that they want to see, that they need to see. And so what you'll find also that companies' response to this is they will question whether or not this person is still the right fit. They will question whether or not they're prepared for leadership. They're not seeing the same results in their performance. And remember, organizations are not considering the person's impact or the work that they've put into the ERGs. Absolutely not. They're evaluating the person's performance based on whatever you get paid for. And it is not an ERG. Your work, if your work suffers within your what pays your bills, if you would, that is what you're going to be evaluated on. And so whether that's fair or unfair, it is what it is. And so as an organization evaluates the individual within the ERGs based on their performance and their output of the work that they actually pay you for, That evaluation may or may not be favorable based on everything else that's going on. You're being pulled in, so many different directions. And what you'll find is something may suffer. So that's one impact that it may have on employees within the ERG groups. Another unfortunate impact that I've seen on employees who are a part of or drive in ERG groups is that whenever the organization finds themselves in an unfortunate financial, what they will do is they will start, doing layoffs. We see that on a global scale currently, and we will continue to see that as we move forward in different levels, right? It'll go in waves. Well, we're in the wave now where a lot of companies are doing layoffs, have done and will continue to do it. This may come as a shock to you that employees within ERG groups are some of the first to be let go. Why is that? Well, for the very reason I just explained. Is this fair? Life is not fair. Is this the right approach? No, it's not. Nothing is fair. However, employee resource groups without structural, sustainable strategies in place will become a blight within the organization. And the employees who were the initial benefactors of an employee resource group will often be the first to suffer the consequences of having an ill-prepared, unsustainable, not lacking strategic structure ERGs. They will be the first to suffer. Now, let me interject something really quick. I know I'll have individuals that say, guess what? What if your employer decides to hire a team of individuals focused primarily around DEI, right? So you've got a DEI, let's say director, or in some organizations, they'll hire a chief diversity officer. Hopefully that person has a team of individuals around them to support their initiatives and efforts. Side note, if your organization just hired one DE&I person or just a chief DE&I officer and there are no specific structure to support this one singular person, please note that that person is set up for failure and that person will not be in their role for very long. Outside of that exception, you now have a team of individuals whose dedication is around D&I within the organization. Usually these individuals were hired externally. What happens with the ERGs? What you will typically find is they will bring change. Now, good and some not so good, but it will be change nonetheless. What you'll also find is these changes will directly impact the ERG groups and the individuals within them. ERG members who have put their blood, sweat, and tears into building this ERG to what it is now, however it looks, they will feel slighted. They will feel like now these individuals are coming in, making changes. They now have the power and authority that the current ERG members were never given in the first place. And you may have a sense of resentment, not of gratitude. But sometimes you'll find the result is it gets worse before it gets better. You may have long-standing ERG members who choose to remove themselves from the ERG. You will find individuals will take a step back from the ERG and refocus in something else. So you may find that this will actually create a disruption. Now, all hope is not lost. This is change. And change sometimes can be a little bit painful before it does get better. In my next video, we'll focus on 3 key areas that I just did not get a chance to cover in this video. I told you it was going to be long. And these are, we'll focus on what does good look like, and good in terms of leadership accountability and involvement, ideal ERG structure and strategic long-term planning, and how does that align to the employee development and growth, both on an internal and external basis. So we'll focus on those topics in my next video and we'll cover those in greater detail. So I think that will help a lot of individuals. With that said, thank you so much for joining me on this discussion today. I think it's a really important one. So please feel free, leave your comment suggestion on maybe the next series that we could cover or the next topic that we could cover. Okay, this was so much fun. I love the topic around ERGs, especially because it impacts employees directly. So please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss when I upload the next video in this series. Like, comment, and share it with your friends, your boss, your CEO, your coworker, everybody you know. All right, until next time.